Work permit system. Course contents 1. Course objectives 2. What is work permit system? 3. Safe permit application flow. 4. Guidelines and requirements. Course objectives. To familiarize you all with the requirements of the work permit system. To familiarize you all with the operational requirements of the work permit system. To justify the need for an effective work permit system. Course objectives. To provide permit signatories with sufficient knowledge of the work permit system to enable them to fulfill their role. To provide non-signatory participants with sufficient knowledge of the work permit system to enable them to contribute to the integrity of the work permit system during their normal work activities. The measure of any system or procedure is not how good it looks on paper, but how well it serves its purpose and how well it is made to work in the field. Proper implementation, consistent operation and good monitoring will enable the work covered by a work permit to be executed in a safe and controlled manner. Compliance with work permit system. Compliance with the work permit system is applicable to subcontractors' employees. All contractors, if they work in our construction areas. What is work permit system? The work permit system is a formal safety system, the objective of which is to control specific work activities which are known to be potentially hazardous in relation to the health and safety of personnel, the integrity of the operation, facility, equipment. A work permit is not a permission to carry out hazardous jobs. A work permit is not a permission to carry out hazardous jobs. It is an essential part of a system which determines how that job can be carried out safely and clearly identifies the controls to be put in place. The issue of a permit does not by itself make a job safe, that can only be achieved by those preparing for the work and those carrying it out. Activities covered included but not limited to all works in live, construction areas. Activities liable to give rise to flammable atmospheres, for example painting, insulation, etc. Hot work in live areas or areas subject to potential flammable atmospheres as above. Excavation works. Heavy lifts, crane activities, rigging works. Use of man baskets. Explosion devices. Confined spaces. Radiation, etc. Working on live electric systems. Electrical and mechanical testing. Electrical energization. Pneumatic integrity pressure testing. Flushing, blowing and line cleaning operation. Removal of handrails and gratings plus working at heights on incomplete walkways. Commissioning activities, for example tightness testing, simulation runs, inerting, dryouts, catalyst loading, preparing the plant for operation. Special conditions, for example emergency permits at night. Working over water outside of fixed barriers. Safe work permit. Safe work permit must be reviewed and signed by superintendent, supervisor, foreman. Safe work permit must be validated and approved by contractor, owner, HSE permit control personnel. Safe work permit control number indicated, date/date duration was valid and work area should be specified on its exact location and elevation. Description of work should be more specific to identify high-risk activities. Live systems in the work area must be identified, temporary, permanent underground electrical cable, piping, etc. Work execution plan should contain specific detail of work to be done or brief description of planned work to identify the predictable hazards. Precautionary measures should be written specifically and accordingly appropriate to the hazards associated with the intended work. Hot work permit. Follow the steps in checking the safe work permit. Work to be done must be specific. Equipment number shall be indicated, if any. Review all check-off items on general preparation checklist and verify with work in charge if requirement was met. If conditions are all not met, a special procedure should be prepared. Protective equipment checklist is check-off. Supervisor to write sign his name approving the hot work permit. If work is not completed, fill in the date, time and status of the uncompleted work and sign out the safe work permit. If work is completed, ensure that area was cleaned after the work, then check off the checklist and sign out the safe work permit. Confined space entry permit. Follow the steps in checking the safe work permit. Location and description of confined space shall be specifically identified. Purpose of entry briefly explained. List all materials to be taken into the confined space. Counter-check if all materials were removed after the completion of work. Identify the hazards in the confined space. Physical, atmospheric hazards. Supervisor shall ensure that all requirement of the entry permit was met, reviewed and check off slots marked before allowing entry. Additional requirements could be included as part of the permit as added instructions or precautions to ensure the safety of all the authorized entrants. All authorized entrants shall be pose an individual confined space access pass, ID. Assign a certified confined space attendant. Maintain an entry-exit personnel accountability log. A competent person shall do test for atmospheric hazards. Evaluate the confined space for physical hazards. Contact person's name and phone number should be indicated. Supervisor and safety in charge should sign the bottom line of the permit as acceptance and acknowledgement that work can commence safely in the confined space. Crane and lifting works. Fill up the equipment lift record card. Description of work. Assigned crafts. Rigging equipments to be used. Material, equipment to be lifted. Type of lifting device, make, model and capacity. Responsible supervision should sign over his printed name. Fill up the job safety plan, duly signed by the crane operator and rigger, for above 25 tons, rigging supervisor and HSE manager. Description of work. Assigned crafts. Rigging equipments to be used. Material, equipment to be lifted. Type of lifting device, make, model and capacity. Ensure that requirement was met and check off. Attach an area plot plan clearly indicating work location and lighting positions. Work permit application flow. For daily work activities. Step 1. Safe work permit with the necessary attachments, i.e. area plot plan, excavation, confined space, rigging, lifting, hot work etc., should be prepared by the supervisor, permit applicant 1 day before the work execution. It must be properly filled up and signed by the concerned supervisor. See attached guidelines for SWP requirements. Submit safe work permit to HSE permit coordinator at the HSE permit training room not later than 8 a.m. 1 day before the work execution. Safe work permit must be registered at Permit Control Logbook. Step 2. Safe work permit coordinator will check or review the work permits to ensure that the following were complied. Permit duly signed and reviewed by FM, Superintendent. Special precaution and equipment required are checked. All required attachments are provided. Safe work permit control number indicated, date was valid and area of work should be specific, i.e. elevation, column no, etc. Brief description of work and detailed JSA for the specific job, to identify the hazards and safety precautions. Before 10 a.m., all work permits reviewed and approved by the HSE permit coordinator will be forwarded to contractor HSE permit office for approval, with a receiving list. Approved SWP will be collected by HSE permit coordinator from contractor permit office at 3 p.m. of the same day. at 4 p.m., one day before work execution, or 6 a.m., day of work execution. Supervisor, permit applicant should collect their work permit at the HSE Training Permit Office. All work permits intended for Saturday activities shall be applied 2 days before the day of work execution, Thursday. Friday works. Every Thursday, responsible supervisors, department heads shall submit list of personnel for specific activity, see attached form, employee list for overtime works, and submit to HSE Permit Coordinator at HSE Training/Permit Office not later than 8 a.m. HSE Permit Coordinator will review the request for overtime, including relevant work permit and other attachment, i.e. emergency contact person or duty officer, line supervision, area plot plan/location, etc. Before 10 a.m., all work permits reviewed and approved by the HSE Permit Coordinator will be forwarded to contractor for approval, with a receiving list. Contractor will release the approved extended overtime at 3 p.m. and applicants will retrieve the permits at Permit Office, up to 4:30 p.m. Responsibilities. Construction Manager has overall responsibility for ensuring that provision are made for the implementation of safe systems of work. He is responsible for appointing all personnel who are authorized to sign work permits. Their names will appear on the authorized signatories HSE list. Issuing Authority. The issuing authority should be a person of sufficient seniority and authority to determine priorities of work. He should be fully familiar with the works ongoing within the areas and the nature of those works. Personnel to fulfill this role are likely to be Area Construction Manager, or their authorized substitute. The application of the work permit procedure, for any area or system, shall be the responsibility of the Area Construction Manager, shift supervisors who are responsible for that area or system at time of issue. They will liaise with the HSE Manager in all respects. HSE Manager. The HSE Manager has the responsibility for conducting permit-to-work training, monitoring the operation of the permit-to-work procedure by the field operation groups, updating the authorized signatory list, as per HSE record and proposing the list for appointment. The authorized signatories list shall detail the status of the signatories. He also has responsibility to provide advice and guidance on the activities and precautions to be governed by the work permit system. Permit Receiver. A competent person nominated by contractor or the subcontractor, with supervisory responsibilities, who has been trained and is familiar with the requirements of the work permit system. The permit receiver shall ensure that he has successfully completed work permit course. The work crew has received adequate instruction, been adequately briefed in the work permit system. He discusses the job fully, inclusive of any integral hazards, the required safety precautions, including isolation and PPE, with the authorized supervisor. The permit is posted, prominently, on the job site. The work crew is briefed on the permit details, including any potential hazards, and on all precautions taken, or to be taken. The precautions are maintained throughout the work activity. The precautions are maintained throughout the work activity. The workers understand that, if circumstances change, the work must be stopped and advice sought from the authorized supervisor of the permit. The work crew stays within the limitations set on the permit, physical boundaries, type of work and validity time. On completion or suspension of the work, the site is left in a safe condition and the supervisor informed. Supervisor. The supervisor shall ensure that the supervisor has responsibility for the work to which the permit relates. He is responsible for ensuring that the correct precautions and isolations are detailed in the permit and are correctly implemented in the field. He is also responsible for the daily renewal of the permit after checking the site and setup of the work, ensuring that all precautions are still in place and circumstances requiring amendments to the permit have not arisen. All the hazards associated with the work are identified. When permits are raised by permit receiver, the same person cannot also be the permit issuer. The permit issuer shall ensure that the person in charge of the job, the contractor/permit receiver, fully understands the nature of the applicable work. All the hazards associated with the work are identified. All the necessary precautions are implemented, including isolations, before work begins. All persons who may be affected by the work are informed before work begins, when work is suspended and when the work is complete. That permit, for tasks that may interact, are cross-referenced. The effective arrangements are made for the worksite to be examined before work begins, as appropriate and upon completion of work. Sufficient time is spent, at shift handover, to discuss all ongoing or closed permits with the incoming authorized person. The sufficient supervisor's visits are made to the work site, during progress of the work, to confirm the consistent application of the permit requirement. HSE Permit Coordinator. The HSE Permit Coordinator is responsible for ensuring that all sections of the permit forms are completed by authorized signatories prior to issue. He is responsible for full clerical control of the system, including retention of the closed-out work permit for the defined period. All active permits will be marked on a plot plan displayed on the wall of the permit office. Others work permit monitoring by 1. HSE 2. Client representative. 3. Audit, inspection teams may contribute to the integrity of the work permit system by ensuring that the permit copies are displayed at the worksite and present in work permit office as required, checking that the work is being carried out in accordance with the time parameters of the permit. Checking that the work is being carried out in accordance with the physical parameters of the permit. Checking that all foreseeable hazards have been identified and that arrangements are in place to control or eliminate those hazards. Asking question of work crews, to test their understanding of the work permit system, the permit which is in place, the job it covers, the hazards involved and the applicable safety arrangements. Completion of the work permit form. Upon completion of the job, and when isolation have taken place, the contractor, supervisor shall, via the client's supervisor, authorized, request the necessary de-isolation. The authorized person shall instruct the electrician/mechanic, as applicable, to carry out the necessary de-isolation if is it do so,